Welcome to A Date with Darkness podcast, where I will be discussing the impact of hurtful and abusive relationships and how to overcome them so that you can move through your pain and get to the kind of healthy relationships you want, need, and deserve. I'm Dr. Natalie Jones. I'm a licensed psychotherapist based in California. While I hope that you find this podcast educational and informational, please note it should not be substituted for treatment with a licensed mental health professional. Also, due to the nature of the podcast, some of the information presented on the show can be sensitive to some of my listeners, so please note that listener discretion is advised. Hello, and welcome back to A Date with Darkness podcast. I'm so happy to be back. I took a little bit of a hiatus, so just took some time away from the podcast to work on some more creative projects and things like that I have coming up. But I'm so happy to be back and be connecting with everybody. It's, it's always great to come back and talk about something which I'm so very passionate about, and I hope that you guys are finding useful. But today's topic, I want to just kind of dive in. I have some notes here that I've made to myself, and, I'm sending out a newsletter tomorrow. So this podcast and the newsletter will be released on the same day, and they're both going to basically be discussing the same topic. But I wanted to take a deeper dive on the show to definitely talk more about this topic because I posted it on social media, which is where you'll definitely find me hanging out these days, and it resonated a lot with a lot of people. I've talked about it over the years with clients, public speeches, television, things like that I've done over the years. And I feel like this is something that resonates with a lot of people. And what it is when we hang in there in a relationship, or we hold on, or we wait so long for an abusive person that we're in a relationship with to change. We are holding on to that potential. We are, we're listening to those false promises. We're discounting how we feel. We're giving that person the benefit of the doubt. We're doing anything and everything just to hold out for that little bit of hope that the abusive person that we're in a relationship will change. And we do that for a number of reasons. What I will say, the most common reason that I found that people do this is because they're invested in the goal or the outcome of the relationship. And what that looks like is instead of sort of, how can I say this the right way? Instead of just kind of being in tandem or being present or being focused on what the person's actions are in the present moment, or even kind of what they've shown you about their character in the past, we are so focused on the outcome. The outcome is going to look different. That could be a financial outcome, that could be living together, that could be we have kids together, that could be I want to get married. So I could be so focused on all of these other things, the goal, that I'm going to discount all the behaviors that are abusive or that are toxic or that are dysfunctional along the way, because I am so invested in having that prize or that goal at the end of the rainbow with you. And we don't pay attention to, or we may pay attention, but we quickly discount or minimize your inability to be the most suitable partner for us, the most healthy partner, or the partner that is actually even likely to fulfill the goals that we want. And a lot of people would say, and I would agree, that this is like an anxious attachment style. We're worried, we're so focused on that, or we're so worried that we might not get these things, that we cling even tighter to someone, even though we know that they are not good for us, or that the outcome, to a certain extent, or the present moment isn't really good. We're just going to kind of look the other way. We're going to hang in there. The other reason that people sort of do this is because we saw glimmers of what we thought was a genuinely good person in the beginning. During the honeymoon phase, everything was gravy. We were in love. You that person may have been super affectionate, super adventurous. You guys could relate on a lot of things, and you had a lot of commonalities, common interests. And that person told you everything that you wanted to hear. And so you got a taste of that. And when things were good, they were really, really good for you. And again, you're focused on, the goal, or the outcome rather, that perhaps we can get that back. We want so very much to get that back and be back in that happy place and have that connection with that someone, even though their actions are clearly showing us that it's not possible, it's not likely. And so those are, for me, in my work as a therapist, those are like some of the top two reasons, that people normally do that they hang in there in a relationship. Other things that people may throw out also, we have kids together, or that person's a good mother, or they're a good father, that sort of thing. And they're invested again in that sort of that goal of keeping the family intact, or having their children have a parent, that they're quickly discounting, all the evidence that points to the contrary. So it's interesting when people say to me, I'm going to hang in there because, I want my family to work, or this person is a good parent. Well, the things that I have to say about that is, you are your child's first role model. And as their role model, that your children look to you, whether it's good or bad, they look at your behavior in which you demonstrate, because you are their role model. You may be their idol. They look to you for cues on how they should behave, what types of relationships that they should pick out for themselves, maybe even how they should treat men or women or people in general. So they're picking up those cues. So if parents are abusive to each other, or there's domestic violence, or even if there's no hitting but there's some covert stuff, there's some financial abuse, there's some psychological stuff, children pick up on that, and that does have an impact on your family. And so I always challenge that with, is it better to keep the family intact, um, and have your children potentially pick up on those things, and you also sort of weather that storm just to stay connected to somebody, even if it's not really a connection, but it's a connection in theory or on paper. But physically, you guys aren't really connecting. Emotionally, you guys aren't really connecting. Verbally, you might not even be able to connect. You might not even be on the same page, or even in the same book, or even in the library. You know what I mean? So you guys could be just so out of sync. But these are stories, that people commit to because, again, they are very invested in the outcome. So what I wanted to talk a little bit about today is things that we can do instead of waiting for an abusive partner to change. And I've delved a little bit into that already, because I kind of get ahead of myself sometimes, but I want to talk a little bit about some other stuff that we can do. And one of the things, and that the first thing I always tell my clients, or just people in general, is to always make sure that you invest in your own potential instead of putting so much stock into someone else. Someone else, or the outcome. Okay. I thought I had done my phone. I feel like I do this a couple of times. Instead of investing so much in the outcome of another person or an outcome of a relationship that has clearly got some stuff going on that may not be fixable or salvageable. Invest in yourself, invest in your own potential, invest in your own outcome, because that is the only outcome, really and truthfully, that you will be able to control. If you have small children, there's a certain amount of investment that you can do in theirs. But first and foremost, you should always invest in yours and making sure that you are good, that your future is bright, and that you're operating on 1,000. Because how can things work if you burn yourself out trying to make it work with somebody else who's not as equally invested in the final product? So again, turning that back and investing in yourself, because you should always be invested in your outcome, your future, and your potential first and foremost before anybody else's. That's the epitome of self-care, self-awareness, self-compassion, all of that kind of stuff. All of that kind of comes out of that. And, that could look different in terms of investing in your future, or your own potential. It could be getting your finances together. It could be going to therapy and talking to someone who is objective and can really talk to you about what's going on and how to get your self-care and your self-awareness back on track, how to develop better boundaries, those sort of things, how to even and not just necessarily about healing, but sometimes we also need to remind ourselves to have fun too, because what happens a lot of the times when we have these relationships is we get so lost in somebody else. We spend all this effort, this energy trying to be the perfect person, trying to make it work, that we get lost. We don't have fun anymore. We don't go out anymore. We don't know what we're interested in anymore. But we can tell you about that other person. We can tell you about what ticks them off or what's not working for them, because we're so invested in that. But getting back to that, and even something, it's always interesting too. One of the things that I've also noticed, that when people are overly invested in others, one of the first things that they neglect or they stop taking care of is their own health care. So even something as simple as going to the doctor and getting checked out, if you're not feeling good, maybe taking some time off work to just sort of think back over some things and just sort of get your health back on track, get your mind back on track, just to have a day by yourself where you're not, mom, where you're not girlfriend, where you're not, uh, going to work, where you're not fighting with somebody, and you could just be you. So just getting yourself back on track for those kind of things, and just definitely investing in your own potential. Which leads me to the second thing. Always try to remember to check in and be loyal to yourself. Again, loyalty is a very interesting thing. And I find that, again, people who are in abusive relationships, they look to others to be loyalty to them, or they look to others to prove their loyalty to them. And they get upset or frustrated when people are looking out for themselves, or they put themselves before you because you've always put them ahead of you. But when you look to them to do the same thing, they're not going to do it, because they're looking out for themselves. And so, again, that kind of feeds back into, number one, a little bit, but it also, checking in takes it a step further, because checking in requires you to also have some sense of self-awareness. Therapy is really good with that, because a good therapist will ask you to, check in with your emotions. They will ask you, how are you doing today? They're asking you what sort of feelings are coming up around certain situations or certain people. Where does that feeling come from? So they're going to tap into how you're feeling. And if you go regularly enough, which I always advocate for that, once a week, twice a month minimum, if you go regularly, you should learn how to check in with yourself on a regular, just having that sense of self awareness. And it can be something as simple as having like one of those like little feeling charts that you get from the doctor's office, those things, but just making a mental note, when you're feeling upset or when you're feeling frustrated, what's triggering that. And why is this causing me to feel this way? Why am I reacting this way to this particular emotion? Again, this is called mindfulness and awareness, self-awareness. So I think that's especially important because a lot of times what we will do is minimize how we're feeling, what we're feeling, how long this has been going on. We'll put that to the wayside, even though we haven't been feeling good about a particular person or a situation or what's been going on or some suspicious behavior, we'll put that to the wayside because we want so very much to achieve that outcome. So I'm asking you to kind of redirect and go back to focusing on yourself. And thirdly, what I will mention is making sure that you're connecting with others that also align with your beliefs and values. One of the things that happens when we get into a relationship with an abusive person is we get so far removed, we get so far disconnected from our peers, from our family, but in ourselves to a certain degree, and then we also start making mental modifications or doing jumping jacks when the person that we're with starts doing some stuff that's not good for us. We will go through mental jumping jacks to try to justify that, and we will twist ourselves and mold ourselves into this person in order to make it work with this person that's not good for us. And so, what I'm asking you to do is to go back and reflect on what your core values and your core beliefs are. What, independent of who you're with or anything, just when you think about yourself as a person, what do you believe in? What do you value? Do you value empathy? Do you value respect? Do you value boundaries? Do you value communication? Those would be some of the things that you value. Do you value, pleasure, or, do you value time? Those would be some of the more common essential values. Family is also another one. So if these are like at your being, like your things that you like for yourself as you go through your life that you've always wanted, and this is what resonates with you, go back and reevaluate and reassess what those things are. And then for you internally, reevaluate just independent of any relationships, and then start doing an evaluations of all of your relationships around that and see if people in your life are actually matching up and aligning with that. If they are not, if you find that people are not, and usually if you're in an abusive relationship, a lot of times you will find that you're at a deficit, then it sounds like you've got to do a lot of spring cleaning in your relationship closet. So that's something to also think about. Fourthly, what I want to mention is trusting yourself and what you see every day. Again, I spoke about doing mental jumping jacks and just sort of discounting what we feel, discounting what we're seeing, discounting how this person is behaving towards us or moving through life, some of the things that they're doing that we may not necessarily agree with, but we'll do those mental jumping jacks to make it work because we're so invested in the outcome of that relationship, not wanting to be single, wanting us to stay together, wanting us to have a family, that you really start to look the other way and say, hey, you know what? I don't, it doesn't matter, that it's not really what I think it is, or this person is, they, they are having a bad day, or, that's not who he is, or who he or she is, or, maybe I misinterpreted. And so you start doing these things where you quickly discount. I'm going to invite you to go back to trusting what you see and what you observe and what you feel. And I think, again, this is where therapy comes into play because you need an objective person to help you with this. Because if you're deep in the trenches of an abusive relationships, you might have some pinings, some thoughts, but again, gaslighting and other manipulative or control tactics can definitely do a number on your brain also and cause you to continue to second, triple, or whatever guess yourself, or you can have some anxiety, you can have some PTSD symptoms that sort of get in the way. So I definitely think a therapist that's trained in abuse can help you here. um, Again, part of stabilizing yourself, instead of putting so much potential in what you want, is part of stabilizing yourself is surrounding yourself with, again, good people that are rational, objective, and nurturing people that have good boundaries. People with good boundaries especially are going to be important, because they can model that for you. They can, you can kind of look to them for more appropriate social cues and how things should be. People that are nurturing will also be good for you, because it'll be nice to sort of have that. You need that in your life, just like a good support network, a good social circle of people who care for you and love you and that will be there for you, if things don't work out, and that you can always count on them, that you're not going to be alone, or that, this is probably one of the more important factors that's going to help you stabilize yourself should you decide to ever leave. Should you just be thinking about leaving, or just changing yourself, or really just sort of doing something that's going to better yourself and your situation, is a good, strong social support network. I cannot emphasize that enough. And, the bigger, the better is what I will say. Everyone that's in your support circle does not need to have the same amount of access to you. They don't need to have the same amount of access to your information. It doesn't mean that they can't be supportive in other ways. So you might be able to go out for lunch or brunch or drinks with someone, and just kind of have some good laughs. You might have a best friend or close family member that you tell the intricate details about what's happening. You might have a therapist that you tell about some other stuff that's happening. You might have a pastor or a spiritual friend that you connect with on a spiritual level. So there's, you might have that coworker that you say, hey, what's up? And maybe talk about, like, some celebrity news or COVID or something like that. And it's like a mild distraction, or a pleasant distraction is what I mean to say, at work. But it's always nice to see that person every day. And while you may not have in-depth conversations, it might be enough that the interaction is pleasant enough, and that person causes you to smile, or at least just smile, or at least, like, kind of, I don't want to say forget, but helps you just sort of disconnect from all the chaos that might be going on at home. So that's always a good thing. And lastly, which I think I've said it like several times, you can call me biased here, but I cannot emphasize seeing a therapist enough. It's important to see a licensed trained professional. Coaches and things like that are great, but they are not the same as a licensed mental health professional. It's not the same. And Again, I may be biased, but a therapist is going to be objective. They're going to help you. You might need medication, so they may be able to refer you to somebody if you need that. But I definitely think having that person, you may have some other diagnoses that are going on as well, that a good objective therapist can help you with. Having them help you plan safety exits out of your relationships and things like that is also a great benefit. And I think one of the other reasons couple other reasons I think it's also good to see a therapist as opposed to a coach, especially if there's violence or if there's something significant that goes on in your relationship, or if there's a court, something happens legally, which you have to go to court. That could be divorce court, custody, or domestic violence court. A good therapist, like I work with my clients, when I work with my clients, I provide them coaching on all of that. Like I actually walk them through the legal system in terms of what they should be looking for, how to select an attorney, or things that are pretty serious that they may want to look into. And so that's part of the work that I do. In addition to counseling, I do work with the legal system. So I'm going to be sure to walk my client through something. I'm also going to be, educating them about some safety concerns if safety concerns come up, perhaps some other maybe legal ramifications. And although I'm not an attorney, I've worked with enough domestic violence, as well as been in a correctional setting and other sorts of settings with other sorts of legal professionals, such as parole, pretrial, um, and I feel like there's others, but other settings in which I've seen a lot of these things sort of play out. I worked at, again, domestic violence, and they had their own legal clinic. And so those would be things a therapist may also be asked to testify. And so that could be one of the things that could be one of the ways in which your therapist is definitely going to be different, because they may be asked to testify. Or if you're not seeing one regularly and they send you to a licensed professional, they may send you to a licensed professional to do some sort of assessment. And so it's going to be very important for that. It's also important that even if you have supportive family members and friends, they are not your therapist. They cannot be your therapist. It's unfair of you to expect them to do so. It's not fair for you to exhaust the supportive system that you have. It's good to utilize them, but to overly exhaust them or to sort of triangulate them or pull them into stuff, that's not fair. And at the end of it, what may happen is, you might end up overextending, overly exhausting that relationship, or it may end up fracturing the relationship, or there may be some feelings of resentment there, or other things can happen when you overly exhaust your support system and look to them to tell you, hey, is it okay if I talk to you about this? Hey, is it okay if do you have a minute to talk about X, Y, and Z? Because you don't want to develop a habit of dumping on them. With a therapist, you have access to that, and again, they can help provide you with guidance, and that's what we're trained for. So anyhow, I hope that you've enjoyed this podcast. I came on here fully expecting this to be like 10 minutes. So I think this is well over the 10-minute mark. But I'm happy that I came on because it's always nice to really connect with folks and talk about something that I'm passionate about and hope that I'm helping you at the same time. But anyhow, tell me what you think. Make sure you, check out the YouTube channel, drop a comment there, drop a comment on the Instagram podcast page or Facebook page. I always love reading that, or even drop me an email, adatewithdarkness@gmail.com. I always love hearing what people have to say. And I appreciate you sticking in there with me. And I look forward to talking with you next time. And I hope everybody is still out there practicing the safety guidelines for COVID. I know they relaxed them a little bit, but I still hope that you guys are being safe. And until next time, you guys be well and take care. Bye.